Dr. Tinnon-Brock, if you'd like to introduce your student.
I sure would. I'd like to introduce Tabitha Rayburn. She's worked with me on a couple of things before, but this one in particular is of interest to me because I teach biogeography, and she's looking at it in a little bit of a different context. She's looking at it through video games, and so I'm just going to let her go ahead and start her presentation.
Hello everybody, my topic is Genshin Impact, a case study of virtual biogeography. Genshin Impact is a mobile game that's open world, and it was made available on Android and Apple devices in the year 2020, and in 2021 it opened up to PlayStation 5. The concept is that you choose one of these two characters and you explore the world so that you can become more powerful, interact with characters, your environment, and learn more about the story that MiHoYo has to offer. The world that you're going to be exploring in Genshin is the country and world of Tibet. So far we have 4 countries available to us. We have Mondstadt, we have Liyue, and we have Inazuma, and most recently we have Sumeru. In these countries, we have different assets to interact with. We have plants, we have animals, we have ore, we have fruits, we have vegetables. And I want to examine what all of these have to offer, where we can find them, what kind of logic there is behind these density pockets of these many very small and specific interactable objects. And I did a whole story map that examines like 3 species from 3 different countries, but for the sake of this presentation, I'm picking 3 species to show you today. One of them is a species that has no negative impacts on it, so it grows rather freely. One of them is a species that had a case of over-harvesting and has limited distribution, as well as glaze lilies that had a geographical disaster, and the same thing occurred with limited distribution. In Mondstadt, for the species that has wide distribution, we have the lampglass. It's characterized by a green stem with a bioluminescent bulb, and it's used to cook food. It's used to interact with characters to increase their power. And as you can see, that is the country of Mondstadt right there. It's rather large in size. But we can see the distributions of our lamp glasses in forested areas. As you can see in that main photo right there, it's shaded, it has darkness, which means we can conclude that the lamp grass prefers shady and partial light. And we have pockets of density on either sides of Mondstadt on the east and the west, and we have one pocket of density in a forested area below. Now for the silk flowers, this one was pretty cool. This one is a red bush. The silk flower is called that because in the country of Liyue, that's how they make silk. They make silk so that they can export it, so they can make clothing. It's incredibly important culturally. There are so many varieties, but this is the only one that's accessible to the player because of how popular the plant became. It's now a protected plant. That white bloom you see right there is the only one that citizens and people can just generally walk by, and we can see the densities here in the map where it's beside an inn and it's in the gardens of their main capital. In-game, they actually acknowledge that this happens because a main character called Zhang Li, he's preparing a funeral rite, and he's having to gather all of these important flowers. So he's explaining the history of the silk flower, he's explaining the history of the glaze lily, and explaining why we only see these species in these 2 places. For the glaze lily, it has 10 petals that have 5 overlapping sections, and originally, it was in Dihua Marsh. As you can see on that map there, it's not got a lot of land mass. There's a lot of water there, but that's because it wasn't always a marsh. It was drier. It had rich and fertile soil. There's evidence of this. You can go into the game and you can find ruins of an ancient civilization that was destroyed in a large war. So as a result of that, the glaze lily can now only be found in Qingsa village, which have farming territories that have like water type environments to grow the glaze lily, as well as in Liyue Harbor in their gardens. So these plants need to be looked after, they need to be taken care of, we need to make sure that they have a good environment. And then we go into Inazuma. And those species have a more fantastical kind of biogeography and explanation for them. My favorite thing to talk about is crystal marrow, because this is an ore. In the game, the way you harvest ore is that you'll whack it with your sword, or you whack it with your axe, and then you can pick up the object. This is the only ore that we have so far where it's as simple as pressing a button to pick it up like it were a berry or a fruit. And the reason behind that is because it comes from a fantastical serpent that centuries ago attacked Inazuma, and from its corpse, you can find crystal marrow and harvest it. And this is reflected when we look at the map, and I like to call this game Follow the Bones. So in this map, we have different vertebrae, we have ribs that we can look at, as well as like a skull and fangs. And from there, we can overlap that with the crystal marrow. And usually, it will not stray too far away from the bones. The farthest that I've seen crystal marrow grow in game is about what I would equivalent it to about half a mile, which is pretty fantastic considering the scope of this game. And that's the only variance that I've seen whenever it comes to how far outside of the scope of the conditions that it should grow in. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are animals in this game that can be tracked. There are other plants that can be seen. There's fungus that grows there. There are different species of trees that have their own pocket densities in this game. And the artistry here is just so fantastic. And there's a lot of thought, and it's a teachable moment. And it taught me to look around the world itself and find those patterns that I saw in the game that I can also see in the real world. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so since a game is a created artifact, it doesn't
Yes.
have to make sense
It
or
doesn't.
be realistic, but you're saying that they did do a pretty good job of representing the biogeography.
Yes.
So how did they do that? Do you know if on their team they had people who had those skills?
I think they did. I don't have an image of it right now, but if you go into the game, there's actually a menu called Geography, where you can discover new places, and it logs those places for you. There are also websites that are dedicated, that are official from miHoYo, as well as from fans that have tracked this as well as I have. And even in interviews that you can find online, the team says that we've littered clues throughout the game that we couldn't include in the plot, and we love seeing our fans analyze it, and our work is appreciated.
Other questions for our speaker?
Yeah, I do have one. How easy it is to extend the game and to put your own country or your own places?
You mean, can I examine, say, Alabama and
For
find...
example, if I would like to know some part of Alabama or some animals or vegetation, can I extend this game?
This is purely a fictional game, but you can find the themes, like small lamp grass likes to grow in shaded areas. You can also find reflections where there are plants like flowers that prefer to grow in shaded areas as well. This is more or less to teach the basic tools of how to recognize those patterns, not necessarily find equal species.
I think Dr. Gomez may be asking how moddable the game is.
I'm sorry?
How moddable the game is. Can you extend it? Or is it totally closed environment?
It's a open world game, but I think they're constantly expanding.
Yeah. But you could not, for instance, add
No.
a new level.
No. This is the company itself creating these new structures.
Yeah. So at the level of research, for example, in this case, you use the game to see how it impacts the study of the learning curve of the student?
I would have to create a study myself to see if students could have the same recognition patterns that I have. But that's actually an excellent idea that I would love to follow through.
Okay.
Other questions for our speaker? All right, let's thank her again.